Well, all right, and good morning, and welcome to our Sunday school lesson for this wonderful Easter Sunday. I hope everybody is having a great day, and hopefully you're celebrating our risen Savior, even though we can't be together face to face. That really doesn't matter because Christ isn't in the tomb; He is risen, and we can celebrate that anywhere we're at, any place that we find ourselves today. But we are going to get started with our Sunday school lesson. Again, it's here's our book. The Circuit Rider, and it's going to start on page 8 in your Sunday school book, and we're going to be talking about, the title is The Living Christ, and that is our lesson for Easter Sunday. It says the time is AD 30, and this is right after the crucifixion of Jesus, and this is going to be discussing what the ladies saw when they went to the tomb to prepare his body for burial. Of course, it's in Jerusalem, and the golden text actually comes out of the book of Revelation. It's chapter 1, verse 18, the first part of that. And it says, I am he that liveth and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. And this is actually Jesus being quoted here, and he was speaking to John there in the book of Revelation, and these are his words. He says, I am he, I am the one, I am the Christ, I am he that liveth. I was dead, but I am alive, and I am alive forevermore. You see, resurrection, when Jesus was resurrected, it wasn't like Lazarus. Lazarus was resurrected by Jesus, and later on Lazarus died again. However, Jesus, when he rose, Jesus rose forever, in which grants us the blessing of eternal life and our own resurrection. And that's just the great thing about it, and that's one of the things that we celebrate with Easter. And I think that's one of the things we really need to keep in mind as we go through this. But I'm going to read our verses here. It comes out of Luke chapter 24. It's the first 12 verses. I'm going to read through that, and then we will get right into it. It says here, Luke chapter 24, verse 1, Now upon the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they came upon the sepulchre, or the tomb, bringing the spices which they had prepared, and certain others were with them. And they found the stone rolled away from the sepulchre. And they entered in and found not the body of the Lord Jesus. And it came to pass, as they were much perplexed thereabout, behold, two men stood by them in shining garments. And as they were afraid, and they bowed down their faces to the earth, they said unto them, Why seek ye the living among the dead? Now these are the two men, or really two angels, speaking to these ladies. Why seek ye the living among the dead? He is not here, but is risen. Remember how he spake unto you when he said, excuse me, he said, he is not here, but he is risen. Remember how he spake unto you when he was yet in Galilee, saying, The Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men, and be crucified, and on the third day rise again. And they remembered his words, and returned from the sepulchre, and told all these things unto the 11 and to all the rest. It was Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary, the mother of James, and the other women that were with them, which told these things unto the apostles. And their words seemed to them as idle tales, as they believed them not. They thought they were just foolish women, I believe it says in one of the other Gospels. It says, Then arose Peter and ran into the sepulchre, and stooping down and he beheld the linen cloths laid by themselves, and departed, wondering in himself at which was to come to pass. Yeah, that's just an amazing account. And of course, this is recorded in all of our Gospels, and it tells it just from a slightly different perspective. But the fact remains, when they showed up at the tomb, Jesus wasn't there. Jesus had already risen. Jesus was gone. And we know that reading on that he appears to them several times later, but at this point, the tomb is completely empty. The only other people that were there is when the ladies were there. There was these two guys, or these two angels, and then you have some other things that transpire. But I'm going to read our introduction here in our book. It says, The stone was rolled away, not allowing Christ to pass out, for he was already gone, but to allow the women to look in. Consider that. One of the questions, we always ask, well, why did they roll the stone away? Why was it rolled away? It wasn't rolled away so Jesus could get out. It's so other people could look in. It says, there is no description given us for the resurrection itself. No mortal eyes beheld it. No pen records it. The facts only are stated. The silence of the scripture are often as impressive as the words. The empty tomb interprets to us the prophetic word and God's plan for the ages as it begins to unroll before our very eyes. Mysteries are dispelled and we face the great facts of our faith. The whole gospel of grace and glory is told in a few words. He is risen. He is king. He is coming. The seal is broken. The stone is removed. The Son of God has gone forth, having spoiled principalities and powers, leading forth a troop of captives. And that's a quote out of Ephesians 4:8, by the way. Says his soul must live. He must not see corruption. So reads the word, Acts 2:27. The whole structure of our faith is built upon the supernatural power of this man to break the bars of death and come forth from the grave. And the well-attested fact that he did do this enables us to stand by his vacant tomb and shout the shout of victory. He was raised for our justification, and we are therefore justified from all things from which we could not be justified by the law of Moses. He lives now to intercede for us, and hope is radiant with the expectation for this same Jesus shall so come in like manner as you have seen him gone into heaven. And that's quoted Acts 1:11, and it just kind of rounds out and tells the story of how all this comes into play and how it all kind of fits in together with our overall gospel knowledge and gospel understanding of Jesus and all the things that took place at the tomb and all the surrounding circumstances. And I think we a lot of times miss the important nature of the resurrection and what it actually means. We all know it was a miraculous thing. It was a glorious thing. It was a great thing. And it was something that only God could do. But we miss the fact that that resurrection in itself is what grants us also resurrection. That's what gives us hope that when we leave this world, that it's just not over for us, that we're just not going to just return to dust and that be the end, and we're never heard from or seen from again. Our soul goes on and our soul lives on forever and ever. And when we put our faith in Jesus, it lives on with him in heaven with God and all the saints. And that's how we get there, though, is through all the acts of Jesus, including his resurrection. And we often talk about the story of Jesus, his virgin birth, his perfect life, his death on the cross, and his resurrection. And you have to take all of that together in order to have a complete gospel story. You pull out any piece of that, then it takes away the meaning of the gospel, and it takes away the validity of the gospel, and it takes away the saving power of the gospel. So we have to have it all, and the resurrection is an integral part of it all. So, but let's get into our scripture this morning. Let's kind of break these things down a little bit. I'm going to follow along with our Sunday school lesson and go just kind of verse by verse. I don't know how much of it I'll read and how much of it we'll just comment on, but it starts in Luke 24, verse 1 again. It says, now upon the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they came into the sepulchre. And again, the sepulchre is a tomb, bringing the spices which they had prepared and certain others with them. So what's going on here is they had to wait until the sun came up after Passover in order to actually go and see the tomb. Now they took Jesus down off the cross and they wrapped him in these linen cloths and they put him in the tomb and then sealed the tomb. And then after everything was over, this group of women returned, and they returned with these spices. And these spices were the ways that, for lack of better terms, they prepared the body so it didn't stink when they did the funeral. They would have all these spices that would cover up the smell of the decomposing, decaying body. And these women had these spices all put together, and they were traveling very early in the morning, probably just right after the sun came up, as early as they could get out and still be following the Jewish code, the Jewish law. They left and headed out to the tomb. And so the sun, if you can imagine being out very early in the morning as the sun's just kind of rising over the hilltops, and the dews on the ground. So that's kind of the scene that you get, and they're walking along, and the different gospels tell us different names of the different women, and we really don't know exactly how many of them. It was probably 4 or 5 of them, and they were walking along, and then as they were walking along, in one of the other gospels that talks about, they talked about how are they going to get the stone rolled away, how are they going to get to this get to Jesus. Maybe they could find a soldier, maybe they could find someone wandering by to help them, because the thing about the stones is these big, huge, big round stones that they would have, and then they would cut out a dip in the ground, and they would roll that stone into that dip, so you couldn't really just push it out of the way. It took 2 or 3 very strong people to kind of roll it back up the other side of that little divot in the ground in order to roll the stone away from the tomb. And the reason they put a stone in front of it like that is to keep animals and predators and things like that from getting in there and getting to the bodies. I mean, it was a very practical reason why they did it. But they talked and were wondering how in the world they were going to get this stone rolled away from this tomb so they could even get into the body there to prepare it for its final burial. And the final burial is what they would do is after they would prepare the body, they would take the body and they would put it up on a shelf there in the tomb, and then that body would decay and decompose for a year, and then after a year they would take all that would be left, or would be the bones. They would take the bones and gather them up and put them in a small box. It would be like a coffin, but it would be like really small, just big enough to hold the bones. And then they would take those bones and they would put them up on a shelf, another shelf that was kind of hewn out of the backside of the tomb, and that's where they would rest with all the ancestors. They would have all kinds of families. One family would have one tomb, and all the members of every generation would have their own little box in there, and that's where they would their bodies would be forever and ever. And that was kind of their tradition. So they were just following their tradition to go and get this body ready for its final burial. And they're walking along wondering how to get the stone rolled away to get in. And then it says here in verse 2 is, and they found the stone rolled away from the sepulchre. I mean, and this in itself amazing. When they got there, they knew something was up. They knew something was not ordinary. They knew that something had really happened, because they walk up, the stones rolled away. Now, if you read in your other gospels, it talks about how there were Roman guards posted at the tomb, and when the ladies got there were no Roman guards there. They were gone. There was absolutely no guards there whatsoever. And if you read on in the other gospels, it talks about the reason they weren't there is because the angels appeared and it scared them off. It said it scared them pretty much to death. They ran off and they took out of there. And when these ladies rolled up, the angels were there, but they didn't see them yet. But the stone was rolled away. They were like amazed that here we are. We're sitting here at this tomb, and the stone has been rolled away. And okay, we've got full access to the tomb. So what do? They go in. They're going to do their work, and they just take it as a blessing from God that this was already taken care of. They didn't think anything of it other than that. So they go in to begin to prepare the body. And it says, this is verse 3, as they entered in and found not the body of the Lord Jesus. So Jesus wasn't there. Jesus was gone. Of course, we know he was gone. They should have known he was gone, but they didn't know at that time until they got in there that Jesus was gone. And this was a great shock to them. It was a great fear to them. They didn't know where the body of the Lord was. They thought that someone had stolen. Again, in the other gospel accounts, I believe it's Mary Magdalene went and asked somebody who she thought was a gardener, where have you laid our body of our Lord? Where's he at? He's gone. Tell us, we'll go get him, and we'll take care of things. Where's he at? And if you read into that, and you read in a few verses after she asked this gardener, the gardener actually turns out to be Jesus. And it's only when he says her name that she recognizes him as Jesus. So Jesus actually appears to her there at the tomb. But here in Luke, it talks about they're there and Jesus is not there. Jesus is gone. He is risen and gone. And the reason I said they shouldn't have been shocked by this is because Jesus had told them exactly what was going to happen. He had told all of his disciples exactly what was going to transpire, what was going to happen, how things were going to go. And they had to really take in and listen to what Jesus was saying, but they really didn't. And the thing about the resurrection, I'm going to read I underlined one little paragraph here about the resurrection before we go on to verse 4. It says, the resurrection proves that we have a living Savior sitting on the right hand of God, seated with the Father in his throne. We have a picture of his glory that's found in Hebrews 1 and Revelations 1. We do not, as has been falsely charged, worship a dead Christ, but a living Christ. Having shown his power to conquer death, the great enemy, we know he has power to conquer all our enemies. He is the great living leader, inspirer, and protector of his people, who will make his kingdom triumph over all evil. The whole alphabet of human hope is in the resurrection of Jesus. You see, because Jesus had victory, we all can also have victory, and we all will have victory. And so that's just one of the main points there of the resurrection. But reading on in verse 4, it goes on, it says, and it came to pass, as they were much perplexed thereabout, behold, two men stood by them in shining garments. Now, who do you think these two men were? These were not men. These were angels. They stood by them in their shining garments, in their radiant garments, shining with the glory of God, falling off of them to these women. And they're already perplexed and confused and already just kind of looking and saying, oh, Lord, what is going on? Where is our Lord? And then they see these two guys, and, they're going to freak out just a little bit. And it says, and as they were afraid, this is verse 5, and as they were afraid and bowed down their faces to the earth, they said unto him, why do you seek the living among the dead? So they're scared to death. They're laying down and, prostrate, because they think that this is, God's angel of vengeance that's coming to get them. And he says, why are you looking for the living among the dead? Why are you looking for Jesus, who is resurrected, in this cemetery? Why are you even here? And why do you think they asked him that question? Why do you think that the angels were almost perplexed in themselves about why the women were even here looking at this tomb? I'm going to give you the answer here. In verse 6, he says, he is not here, but is risen. Remember how he spake unto you when he was in Galilee. And then verse 7, saying, the Son of Man must be delivered unto the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and on the third day rise again. And see, here's the thing. I'm just going to read it here. It says, the angels refer them to Jesus' own words. If they had believed and paid attention to them, they would have easily believed the thing itself when it came to pass. And therefore, the tidings might not have been such a surprise to it as it seemed to be to them. And see, here's the thing. Jesus, like I said, I told them exactly what was going to happen. He told them everything that was going to come to pass. But they either one, didn't believe him, number two, they weren't listening, or number three, they just didn't get it. But anyway, if they would have listened and believed, this would have not been a surprise. It would have just been, okay, it has happened. Let's go and tell everybody that, hey, it's happened. Let's move on to the next step. These angels wouldn't even have to been there to give them this message. And it made me think about how a lot of times we have a tendency to do similar things. Not necessarily about the message of the resurrection of Jesus, but how many times has God told us to do something or not to do something, and told us what the consequences of our actions were going to be depending on what we choose, but we still choose not to listen to God. We still choose to refuse God. We still choose to do our own thing and go our own way. It's kind of that same situation. If we had just believed and listened, things would have turned out much easier, much better, and we would have probably not had to endure some of the things that we've had to endure. So they ask, he just kind of gives them a summary of what Jesus has already told them. And it says, and in verse 8, and they remembered his words. It was only after being reminded that they remembered his words. And I think God has a way of doing that to us as well, doesn't he? We do something, and then It's like God's word just comes back to us and snaps into our mind, and then we remember and say, oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, that's what God told me. Oh, that's what God's word says about this. I better take care of this business the way God wanted me to. And then in verse 9 it says, and returned from the sepulchre and told these things unto the 11 and all the rest. Now 8 and 9 kind of go together. So after they remember, they say, well, we got to go. We got to tell everybody else that this has happened. We got to tell everybody that Jesus has risen. We got to tell everybody that it's time to go and meet him, that he has risen, and we need to get going with it. So over in verse 9, verse 10, it says, it was Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary the mother of James and the other women that were with them, which told these things unto the apostles. So all these witnesses to this went back and told the other disciples, the other 11, what was going on, because there's not 12 anymore at this point because Judas is gone. There's 11. So they went back and they tell them all these things. And it says, and their words seemed to them as idle tales, and they believed them not. I think in one place it says they thought they were just being foolish women or something to that effect. And it just amazes me that they had no realization that what these women were saying was exactly the same thing as what Jesus had said would come to pass. And I think we've also talked about it in the past about why Jesus would reveal himself to these women who were the lowest of the Jewish society, as opposed to his grand disciples and all this and that. And the reality is, Jesus is Lord of all. And status with God doesn't matter. And our human status is what I'm talking about. Our human stature really doesn't matter with God. It is who God knows is who's going to be obedient, who's going to follow him, who's going to follow his path, and who's going to follow his way is who he's going to reveal himself to. And these were the women who were going to be faithful and were going to allow God to reveal himself to them, and they were going to be obedient and do what God told them to do. So they go back and tell them, and these apostles, it calls them apostles now, these disciples just completely dismiss what they're being told. And then finally, verse 12, Peter kind of, he kind of gets the point, I guess. It says in verse 12, then arose Peter and ran into the sepulchre, and stooped down. He beheld linen cloths and laid by themselves, and departed, wondering himself that which was come to pass. So Peter sees this. He sees the empty tomb. He sees the cloth folded in half. He sees all these things, and he wonders, I wonder what's going to happen. Wonder what's happened with the Lord. Come on, Peter. He's done told you. You already know. We know, honestly. Even I think about this, and I think about how often we doubt Jesus, how often we doubt God, how often we doubt all the facts that are in our Bible. But when we search in our hearts, and we allow the Holy Spirit to search us and to speak to us, he speaks truth into us, and we know that these things are true. We know what the truth is. We know what the reality is. We just choose to reject it on many occasions. And this is Peter just choosing at this point to reject it, probably because he was feeling guilty because he had already denied the Lord. And it's only later when Jesus restores Peter. But at this point, he's probably kind of hoping that it was over, so that this guilt could probably leave him, which it never did until Jesus made everything whole. And that's the thing about our sin as well. See, it's not going to leave us alone until we make things right with God. And I think that we need to hear that this morning. If you have sin in your heart, it's not going to just go away. You can't just sweep it under the rug. It's not going to just leave you alone. You have to make it right with God. You have to. Or it's just going to haunt you for the rest of your days. So those are the verses. I'm going to do two things here. First, I'm going to read this conclusion, and then I'm going to go through the questions here. But this isn't just in the teacher's book. It's not in the student book, but it says, on our own immortality, the resurrection of Jesus Christ is the sure sign, proof forerunner of our own life beyond the grave. Without that supreme and crowning fact, we could have had no certain hope, no assurance, without that he could not have to us I got to switch the page, the resurrection and the life. With that, he can and is. Now that we have in him a living word who can carry out his kindest promises and to be to us all that during his ministry he undertook to be. Wherefore, let us seek to find spiritual life in the once crucified, ever living Savior. He that believeth in him, though he were spiritually dead, yet shall he live. Live in the very deed and truth. Live before God, unto God, and in God, partaking of the life which is spiritual and divine. Let us be assured then of a blessed immortality, for whoso liveth in him and believeth him shall never die. His outward body is dissolution will be a mere incident in his career. So far from it being termination of it, it will prove to be a starting point of another nobler life, that the present one nearer to God and far fuller of power, usefulness, and blessedness. And it's just the reality that our hope, our salvation, our eternal life is found in Jesus and the resurrection of Jesus. And just our final questions here of our lesson. It says here, verse 1, the first question says, how does the removal of the stone show what happens to many of our difficulties? Well, just like God made sure the stone was removed away from them, our difficulties, if we will hand them over to God and give them to God, he has a way of removing those, or at least helping us to get over them, through them, around them. What does the resurrection mean to us? Now, I can answer that, but I think that's something you need to answer within yourself. What does the resurrection of Jesus Christ mean to you personally? In what instances do we find angels throughout the early life of our Lord? Where do we encounter angels ministering to the Lord throughout his life? At what points? At what different times? Think about that. In his childhood, in his early adulthood, in his ministry. All these different times we see the angels there with him. What was the purpose of the angels at the tomb? What's purpose did they serve? Were they just there just hanging out? We already said that their purpose was not to open it so that Jesus could get out, but rather for the people to see in. But also their purpose was to deliver the message that he's not here, he's risen. Don't you remember what Jesus told you? That was their purpose, was to deliver that message. How did the reference to Jesus' own words convince the women? Well, Jesus foretold it. It was a prophecy. Jesus prophesied his own death and resurrection. What is the normal reaction of those who receive good news? How do you react when you receive good news? Are you overjoyed, or think, nah, whatever? Or how do you receive good news? I mean, really good news. Think about it. That's how they reacted to this. Are we as quick to spread the gospel news as we should be? Ooh, that's a good one. Are we as quick to spread the gospel news as we should be? Are we swift in our sharing of Jesus and of the gospel of Jesus? And the last question, how was the women's message received? Well, we know that initially they rejected, but when they went and saw the proof, they began to believe it. And what proof do we need of Jesus' resurrection? What proof do we need to have provided for us? Think about it. Because what proof we need is the same proof that other people are going to need, that we're going to be sharing the gospel with. So with that concludes our Sunday school lesson. If you will, stick around, tune in at 11 o'clock for our Sunday morning worship service. We're going to be pulling some more songs out of our archives, and then I'll be preaching a message for our Easter Sunday. And as always, stay safe, stay well, and if you need me, let me know. Have a great day. Bye.